Hello everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus and compare it against the iPhone 14 Pro Max and see which specific phone is a better one for you. Now what's funny is these two phones are roughly around the same price tag. These phones are kind of competitors, although the Ultra phone is probably the bigger one here. I still think these two phones are almost direct competitors to each other, which is very funny. The S23 Plus I think is slightly less expensive than the 14 Pro Max, but these two phones are super popular. They're going to be, still around for many years to come. So let's go and see how both these phones compare. If you want to pick up either one of these phones, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now starting off with the outside, the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which came out a little bit later last year, on the front, it does have a very good display. Probably one of the best displays, Apple's ever made. It's a 6.7-inch LTPO Super Retina XDR OLED display. It's a 120Hz panel, and Apple did a really good job with this, iPhone display. It's a very high resolution, higher resolution than the S23 Plus. It's a little bit tiny bit of a bigger display. It does have that dynamic island though, which I'm not that big of a fan of. I would actually much rather prefer them just have either a hole punch and maybe even a smaller notch. I feel like with this type of display, it cuts into content a little bit more than it should have, and that's kind of an annoying thing here. But beyond that, it's a very good display. There's really not too much to complain about here. With the Galaxy S23 Plus, this is a probably better display in some ways, and maybe in some ways it's not. It has a 6.6-inch dynamic AMOLED display. So it's 120Hz just like with the 14 Pro Max. It has 1080p, which is really nice. It's a very good display for sure. I don't know if one is substantially way better than the other one. I do like the S23 Plus because you do have the fingerprint sensor in the display, which is really nice, and you do have a much smaller hole punch display. The 14 Pro Max, I think it looks good, like it's a great display, don't get me wrong, but the S23 Plus is more of like a one that I would rather have with those types of features. I think the 14 Pro Max though visually looks like a better display, but the S23 Plus with a smaller hole punch makes a little bit more sense to me. On the bottom they have, their charging ports, Lightning on the 14 Pro Max, USB-C on the S23 Plus, and on the back of both these phones we have our frosted glass backs, which look and feel very premium. Both these phones are some of the most premium feeling phones you can buy right now. They feel really good in the hand. There's really not too much to complain about here. Luckily, no plastic backs or anything on either one of these. Now on the top left, they have their cameras, and this is kind of the one thing between these two phones that is kind of annoying a little bit. And this is one thing about these two phones which is actually really funny. So with these cameras, right, so with the triple camera setups on the top left, totally cool. There's really not too much to complain about here. The frosted glass backs on the back of both these look very good as well. And that was one thing, back in the day when I looked at a lot of these phones that had triple camera setups, they always look good, and I have very few things to complain about in that standpoint. Now, frosted glass backs on these are great. They feel very premium. The only thing is that, one has reverse wireless charging, one doesn't. The S23 Plus does have wireless and reverse wireless charging, which is really cool. The 14 Pro Max does not have reverse wireless charging. It has wireless charging, which is great, but I feel like, again, Samsung, Apple here in this case, could have done a little bit of a better job at giving us more of these type of flagship features. I think on the exterior, the 14 Pro Max looks great. It looks still like a very premium phone, but the S23 Plus gives us things like Samsung DeX, fingerprint sensor in the display, smaller hole punch display, and reverse wireless charging. Those are some really cool things to have that I wish my flagship phone could end up having. Now, moving on to that camera department, the S23 Plus on the back has that 50 megapixel wide-angle lens, 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera, whereas on the 14 Pro Max has a 48 megapixel wide-angle lens, a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera as well. Now, personally for me, one thing I would definitely say with the iPhone 14 Pro Max is that it's a good camera, it's a great camera. There's really not a lot to complain about here. It's very predictable. You'll get very predictable photos and videos, but I don't think there's really any chances Apple's made with these cameras. They haven't really added anything super wild in their cameras in a long time. Cinematic mode even was a cool feature, but we've had cinematic type features on a lot of other phones for a long period of time. So I feel like Apple should go ahead and improve, the feature set that we're getting on these phones. The quality of the lenses are great. I just feel like Apple could just take it up a notch a little bit. I love being able to do 4K 60 on the front and the back, but when I look at something like the Galaxy S23 Plus, even this phone is not the Ultra variant, but this phone does have, 8K video on the back. That is very cool. I'm never going to use something like that, but it's still a really nice feature to have, and when I think back at something like this, it's just something that kind of gives me at ease that even my Galaxy S20 from 2020 has a type of capability, which is so cool. So in this situation, like I said, I'm not too sure what to make of it. I think with a phone like the S23 Plus, it's overall the better camera. You're getting more resolution so you can film in. You're getting a lot more features built in. And I do think, most of the time, anytime you take a photo or a video, a Samsung camera photo will actually probably look better than an iPhone one in some scenarios. Probably in most scenarios, to be honest. The only area where I think iPhones typically win at a majority of the time is usually with Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram and those types of applications. But if you're not really into those apps, you're going to be perfectly fine with the Galaxy S23 Plus. So in that standpoint, I'd probably give it to the Samsung here. Now in the software and the longevity portion, this is where Apple just dominates and this is a very, very good thing that I love about my iPhones. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is definitely going to outlast something like the Galaxy S23 Plus, at least by a few years. Now, to kind of rewind back for those of you who don't remember, every year that a new phone comes out, we kind of compare the older one from last year, like the last one from last year, to the newest ones of this year. So much like these two phones, if you look back at 2019, the Galaxy S10 came out after the iPhone, XS and XR. The iPhone XS and XR are still supported with software. The Galaxy S10 are no longer supported with software. But even if you take a look at the same phones that came out in 2019, the iPhone 11 is still not supported with software. The iPhone 11 is still supported with software, where the Galaxy S10 basically isn't. You could say the same thing about the iPhone 11 from 2019 to the Galaxy S20 of 2020. The iPhone 11 is still supported. The S20 is pretty much on its last supported version of software, I think. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind. iPhones dominate in the software department, but both these phones are going to last for many years, so it's not like you're going to upgrade these phones today. But it is also nice to know that with both these phones, the S23 Plus is still going to be supported with software, but the 14 Pro Max is probably going to outlast it. Now on the performance side, the iPhone 14 Pro Max has that Apple A16 Bionic chip inside of it, with 6 gigs of RAM on all the models, where the Galaxy S23 Plus has that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset inside of it, with 8 gigabytes of RAM on that specific device. Now personally for me, with a phone like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, this is a very good performing phone. It really doesn't get too much better than this type of device, and I think Apple knocked it out of the park with this type of device. It's a very good performing phone. Realistically speaking, whatever you're going to throw at it, it's going to be very smooth, it's going to be very fast, and my favorite thing about iPhones, these chipsets are very much optimized. These are very optimized chipsets, so no matter what you're going to do for the most part, it's going to be a very fast performing phone. Now with the Galaxy S23 Plus, this is probably going to be a faster performing phone, and it's going to give you better speeds in the games that you're going to play in all those different areas. The only thing I would even kind of state though is that the chipset may not be as optimized as something like the A series of chipsets from Apple. So if you're trying to play, like, let's say you're playing a super intensive game, you might get better speeds and better frame rate from something like a Galaxy S23 Plus, but you'll get less battery drain on an iPhone 14 Pro Max. So those are the kind of trade-offs that you're keeping here. If you're always around a charger, then you're going to be fine. But I think even from that point, from my opinion, you're going to be getting really good performing phones from both these. And I wouldn't switch from one to the other to get a little bit of a better performing chipset by any means. So that kind of covers it up there. And to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'll probably tell you is I definitely do think a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus is a very good phone. And I do think currently right now is probably more of the phone that's a flagship in my opinion. Like that is the phone I would look at and be like, oh, like that is the flagship phone here. That makes a lot more sense. With something like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, I think that is probably going to be the phone that's going to age a little bit better. So basically that's going to be the phone that if you go and, buy, it's going to be the one that I think will, be able to last for many, many more years than the S23 Plus. But I don't think you can go wrong with either one of these phones. And I do think both these phones are very solid when it comes down to it. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.